You know, Brian, I came to a revelation as I was watching this season of Survivor. When they put music over all of the challenges, and it makes it seem more intense and theatrical than it is. When in reality, what happens is you hear it more like "Survivor's ready, go." Get that one. Sukchai took the lead. Okay, pick that up. Pick that. No. That. Sukjai wins immunity. Like, that's what it sounds like.
Exactly. And I think they may fix it later on, but in some scenes you can kind of predict when someone's about to win because they use the same like musical sting where it's like, hey, they win immunity.
Yeah, you're right. It does do that build up. But maybe that is what we should do. We should have an ASMR real immunity challenge. I think that would get a lot of views.
Sadly, you're right. Even though I hate ASMR, there's enough people who love it.
I was expecting you to shoot that down hard, but you know what? Let's go with it.
Well, no, the thing is that I am shooting it down. I would never do that, but there's enough weird people in the world who like that.
All right, if you're an ASMR fan, you've just been shamed.
Yes, you have.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys, the show that when we cover Survivor and we talk about the worst seasons, I think this location is a tie. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian, and I agree. This is one of my least favorite seasons. This was kind of a slog, but 6, 7, and 8 are all really great seasons. So in the next few times we're going to be talking about Survivor will be really good ones.
Yeah, I remember that we're going to get into a bunch of other stuff, and we're going to do our predictions at the end of this episode for season 6. And by predictions, I mean, what do we remember? Yeah. But when they showed at the reunion, hey, the next Survivor is Survivor Amazon, I'm like, hey, I think there's a couple more things that I remember about Survivor Amazon than I remember about this one. So
I know a lot about Survivor Amazon, so with me, it'll be so much, not so much predicting as like, what can I say that I remember without giving away, hey, this person wins?
There you go. Well, we kind of did this for this season. When we covered Survivor Marquesas, we're like, hey, what do we remember from Survivor Thailand? And so here's from last episode when we talked about Survivor, here's our, not predictions, here's our memories.
So Matt, I think I have more than you. So what do you remember about season 5 of Survivor, which is Survivor Thailand?
And if there's some things you might say that'll like spark something in me, and I might add after you. The two things I remember: there's a challenge where they're going from one side to another side over like this like balance beam, and once they get to a certain point on the balance beam, there's like an attack area that you can fight one of the survivors and more physical exertion. And one survivor named Clay, this is the only survivor, no, there's 2 survivors I can remember from this season. Those are the only 2. Clay comes out into the middle, and the other person he's going to square off against just grabs him by the throat and starts choking him. And Clay's eyes like are bugging out and he's getting choked. And I think even like Jeff's like, you weren't in the attack area. Like, it's because there's a specifically designated attack area. And if you violate it, you have to put whatever you were trying to bring across back. And the one tribe just was decimating this other tribe, but they kept doing it outside the attack area. They didn't care. They just like, we're going to injure them. We're going to play dirty. But the choke on Clay stuck with me.
Yep. That was one of mine too. Clay is one of those guys who, he's going to rub some people the wrong way.
Yeah.
As is the winner. Because it's me, I remember who wins every season. So I'm not going to say, hey, this person wins, because that's a little less fun for you who might be watching it for the first time. I also remember there's a vote where somebody puts a nickname for when they're voting.
And it was Clay who wrote it. I remember that now.
Yeah. And Jeff's like, who is this? Who'd you vote for? And he's like, no more nicknames. Because it wasn't like, Boston Rob or something. It was a nickname that they had talked about at camp. And Jeff didn't know who the vote was for.
And it was like a long nickname too. Like the old Mama C or something like that. I'm like, what is this name? And it's like, for the first time in Survivor history, I don't know who this vote is for. And Clay would be like, oh, that's for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember there was something about there's a guy and a girl who like, it wasn't a scandal, but like they were sleeping close to each other and someone thought something might have been happening.
That's this
I don't
season?
remember. I believe it's this next season.
What
I don't remember what.
Was it a black couple?
Well, yeah, I mean, they weren't a couple, but yeah, they're both black.
Yeah,
yes.
And then he was like, I have a wife at home. I'm not going to be doing that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Remember,
There's that, and then
I also remember a throwaway line from all of mine are like Clay moments, I guess. But I remember a throwaway line from Clay because it was the first time I realized that more than just first and second place got paid. And Clay at one point says in Tribal Council, says, we're not just playing. It's not like we're playing for $20. This is $1 million. Like that. It's a difference between them. I'm like, oh, so like the last place person gets like what, $20 or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but there is like a pay scale. Like the farther you get, the more money you get.
Which makes sense. I get it.
Yeah. And the last thing I don't remember her from this season at all. I don't remember what she did, but there's a contestant named Sheehan. And I remember because she is the only contestant from season 5 who goes on to play again. She comes back for All Stars because All Stars is season 8, and they bring back at least one person from every season. And season 5, it felt like, all right, we got to put one, and they bring back Sheehan. But I don't remember anything she did in season 5 at all.
Yeah, I looked up a picture of her, and I do not recognize her.
Nope.
But
she's the only return contestant from season 5.
There you go. I remember, I can't remember what his name is. I think it's Brian, who's got like hair that's like parted in the middle. Like he played a guitar or something, right?
I don't know if he played a guitar, but he's got your typical like 90s, early 2000s surfer vibe.
Okay, yeah. I'm fairly certain that I remember his audition video where he grabs raw meat and he just starts eating raw meat on camera.
Huh.
I believe that is so. I think that's what I remember from that. That's my last little moment.
Huh.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
The weird stuff that sticks in your mind. So, obviously Clay left a big impression on me.
Yep.
He was the guy I remembered. Nothing but Clay.
When you also said, I think there's a guy named Brian who has like good hair or something like that, and yeah, he was the winner. So
yeah, that would be why I remembered him. I did remember, when you just listened to it, the Ted and Gandia thing. I remembered it as you talked about it. Did I say I didn't re-listen to this? Did I mention the very first immunity challenge with Gandia where the knife got stuck?
No.
I remembered that, and I was waiting for the season when that happened. So I didn't know it was Survivor Thailand, but I remembered that immunity challenge and like they blowing this huge Atlanta Falcons like lead, and they had to vote someone off because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Poor old John.
Yeah, John didn't really get a whole lot. I mean, the first player out never really gets a whole lot of screen time. There's just really not a lot to him. It's kind of like a crapshoot, unless someone really pisses you off right away.
Yeah. So let's talk about this cast because, I brought up Clay, and for me, it's kind of funny. Just like every single season, that Southern charm always affects me. They always are the memorable guy. I love Roger. Yeah. I love Teresa. I liked Tom. Even though Pascal is from like New England, there's like a Southern charm he has still. Yeah. Maybe it's more like just the old school type behavior. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what I equate with Southern charm. But was there anyone Southern in Marquesas? I was trying to think, and I couldn't think of someone who was.
I mean, was Pasepia Southern? I don't remember.
She might have been, but I mean, like she doesn't have the drawl. I know Pascal didn't either.
Yeah,
but
you got to fit
I don't
that
know.
mold.
I missed the drawl, so getting that back to Clay was nice.
Wasn't as annoying as I remembered him being, except for towards the end when he was like, "Yeah, I want to tell all these ladies that they have a nice butt and all that kind of stuff." It's like maybe that's not a great thing to do. But other than that, I thought I remembered him being like super rude and racist. But he wasn't. And even at the end when Ted is like, hey, have you ever been racist? I was like, Clay, I'm like, where is this coming from? Because if there was, they didn't show it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of funny because I remember liking Clay more than I did this time around.
Yeah,
And that's kind of funny to me because like watching it this time, Helen is the type of character that when I would have first seen this, I probably wouldn't have liked Helen. But I
yeah,
do. So there's a couple strong players that I liked, and there's a couple strong players I didn't like. And I
yeah.
don't like the strongness of Gandia or the strongness of Rob, where it's a little bit more self-centered, a little bit more immature.
Yeah.
Whereas I do like the strong stubbornness of, say, Helen or who else was pretty strong and stuff. I mean, Clay kind of was. I didn't like him as much.
I didn't like Helen in the one challenge. I mean, I get emotions are high when the family members come out and it's whoever can eat the most gross food and they get to spend a day.
Yeah.
But she was like, "Oh my gosh, no! You have to do it. I need this. I need this. Come on, do it, do it, do it." I'm like, calm down.
And her husband's like, "Yes, ma'am," and he did. Oh, Xian was another one who was a really strong personality and strong stubbornness that I liked, and so I gravitated more to players I didn't realize I would have liked as much, and I think I liked Brian too, and I didn't like him as much this time around.
Well, Brian was kind of neutral. I thought I remembered him being like sleazy because I think I remembered that clip of him when he's like, "Oh yeah, ladies can be in the kitchen. Hey, ladies can do my laundry," but like that was joking. But
yeah, this season didn't do a whole lot for men and feminine relations between those comments and an incident we'll talk about later, and what you talked about with Clay objectifying. Although I think that objectification happens every single season, so that's nothing new.
Yeah, exactly. It's just it really was a product of its time, and it wasn't even that long ago. Like we were in like freshman in high school when this was airing.
Yeah. So talking about the cast, are there cast members that you really liked, or the same thing where it's like you liked them the first time or you didn't like them this time?
I remember the first time liking Ted, but this time towards the end, Ted kept getting like he was one of those people who like he didn't get picked on an immunity challenge and then was all pouting. So honestly I didn't like a lot of this cast. I liked Rob at the end after he had that moment, like, oh man, I don't need to be a jerk all the time. And even at the reunion, he's like, yeah, I was seeing myself making fun of people. And I'm like, that's not great to do that. So I liked him right before he got voted out. I like Jan.
What a great epiphany thing is like, I'm finally growing up. Yeah, well, you're still gonna go.
Yeah.
There was so they do every single season. I don't know if they still do, but up until this season, they were doing it and they still did, where it's like they do the walk of survivors when it's the final three and they have the beautiful music and it's supposed to maybe be a little emotional or something like that. And so they're showing these survivors one by one. It's like, oh, look, there they are. They won an immunity challenge. Oh, look, he's smiling. And then they get to Rob and they show him slow motion choking Clay and then slow motion doing the mocking of him or calling him a dumb hick. And it's just like, those are the clips you use to epitomize Rob. Like, I imagine editors must not like him.
I remember I imagine Rob watching that with his family like, oh, yeah, it might not be my finest moment.
I don't have it written down, and I wish I did because I forgot my my notes that I wrote as I was watching this. There was one other Survivor too, where it's like it was a really, really unflattering close-up on their face during like a challenge or something. And it's just like, that's of all the footage you have weeks worth of this. It wasn't like the first one voted out. It's not like they only had 3 days. They had weeks worth of this person. And then they choose like this really, really bad face to show for that slow motion recap. I'm like, do you not like them either? What's wrong with you?
At a certain point, Survivor stops doing this part of the show because they just like they try to get every little bit of strategy out. But I like these early days. This is one thing that really cements early Survivor is the passing of the torch. It'll be around for a while, but eventually it'll stop.
Yeah. We didn't mention a character that I also really liked. I liked Jake. I thought he was he put together a crap team, and we'll talk about team dynamics in a little bit.
Well, at first it seemed really good. Like for a while, it seemed like Sukjai was going to be the one that was going to run away with it.
I mean, yeah, but at the same time, you also see how they are at camp, and really like when you look at a tribe, and we'll talk about the team dynamics soon, but when you look at a tribe and how they are in their camp and the disunity that they have there, that is always going to factor into challenges.
Yeah. Well, one thing that really, I'm surprised it never came up, but early on, Rob and Sheehan were like butting heads, and it bugged me for her when he kept being like, "Oh, sweetie, what are you doing? Did you like what?" He kept calling her sweetie, like condescendingly. I was waiting for her to be like, "Don't call me sweetie," but she never did. They fought, but I'm like, that would really annoy me if someone was using a language like that condescendingly to me.
Real quick before we move on, because we've got more topics to talk about, but one more thing about the cast, and this kind of also dates this show really well. Yeah. So Survivor, these early seasons especially, it was season 2 when they did like the jet ski by the Statue of Liberty and Jeff salutes it during the finale right before they read the votes. Because it was just like right after 9/11, there's a lot more patriotism, a lot more of like the solidarity of a country together, even though I think the Iraq War then split us pretty quickly after that. But this was still fresh in the heels of that. So when they're showing like, hey, all the people on the beach and we're going to pick teams, here's a little bit about all these people. Here's Ken, a police officer from New York, and he got like this, everyone stopped and applauded for him. No one else got applause, but Ken from New York, the police officer, got applause because probably of assuming the role in 9/11. And I'm just like, today you put a police officer from New York in there, he's not getting applause. No,
he's getting boos, if anything.
Yeah.
One more thing about the cast. One thing I like about Clay is he so many times he talks to the camera as if he's the only one who knows how this game is played. He's like, well, don't you know, we're down to 5, and if people vote for me, people don't vote for me, I get to go on to number 4. It's like, yeah, that's how it works. He kept having talking heads like that, as if he is the only one who knows. Yep, we got to get all the numbers, we got to get the votes, and I hope they don't vote for old Clay.
He did that outside the talking heads too. I remember that one of the tribal councils toward the end where he's like, Jeff, we're not playing for $20. This is for $1 million. Like, yes, that is the cash prize for the winner. Yeah. Well done, Clay.
Yeah. Oh, definitely made the show more interesting.
No, I'm just kidding. All right. Well, speaking of cast, we've already alluded a little bit to this. Here's my lead in, because I did talk about this with like the male and female relations, and there's a lot like Brian he was joking, but he had a lot of these chauvinistic type comments to the point that like when Helen in the reunion is talking about like, when I rewatched it back, I wish I would have changed my vote from Brian. Like, I liked him on the island, but I don't think I liked him. And I'm like, I'm guessing it's probably because of these comments he made. But like, then there was definitely the terrible situation between Ted and Gandia. And like, if we're talking about drama of the season, this is like the big moment of the season, right?
Yeah. And so, okay, I want to hear what's your thoughts on the situation, Matt?
Oh man. Well, it's a landmine. No, so I can see both sides for sure. Like, and I think Gandia also realized her part in it, because you can't just say, oh, it was all Ted, even though it was Ted, because Gandia, she had this friendship with Ted and she felt safe with him, and that she's doing things like, if I'm on Survivor, I'm not even like, putting my hand on someone else's leg or like holding their hand or letting them rest against me or whatever. Like, those small steps lead to these sorts of problems. So like both of them were dumb in that situation and like laying so close to each other.
Exactly. They shouldn't have been laying next to each other like that.
Exactly. But like, I can, the reason why I say I can understand where Ted's coming from is like, how disoriented you are in the middle of the night. How many times have you ever woken up where you're like, when you're in a different room than you realize you were like in a hotel room, or you're staying over at a friend's or something like that, and you wake up, you're like, wait, this feels weird, this feels different, and you're trying to like piece together how
like,
you're
where
there.
am I?
Exactly. So
And
like
if
I
he's
can see that disorientation. Now
and if,
how
yeah,
long Ted pursued during that disorientation, like you start to lose the he loses credibility in his story, but it's like if he's first waking up and like thinking he's laying next to his wife, I can absolutely get that.
yeah. Do we know how long it was, or was it?
No.
No, we don't. It's all he. But the thing that annoyed me was, she came up to him and talked to him, and he apologized, and they were good. And then later on, she decided, oh no, now we're not good. And she even said on the talking head, yeah, I went and told everybody what happened. I thought I should tell everyone what happened, but I decided to leave out the part where he apologized.
Yeah.
Like, what a dick move is that?
Exactly, especially for something so like it's a hard enough situation as is to be like to like assign blame and it's I think part of that is Gandia realizing that she was dumb in it and letting him
Mm,
get too close and then like that's where that happened. And so I think that's why, you wouldn't want to tell everyone, well, I had a part to play. Is like, let me paint him as bad as I can so that I
mm,
can feel better about how I was, you
yeah.
know?
And I think there's no surprise that neither of them ever came back to play again.
Yeah. Their spouse is like, nope, you can't.
Well, the only player on this season who ever came back to play again, they only went to this well once, which was Sheehan came back for Survivor All Stars, because that was in that instance they wanted to get at least every previous season represented by at least one person. And I can see them being like, oh, we have to go to the Thailand well. Okay, let's just pick one person and be done with it.
It's not like Thailand had like a bunch of bad characters in it. But there is definitely between the Tengandia thing,
Mm.
um, yeah, I
Well,
hesitate to say negative things about Brian because Brian played a good game.
yeah. Well, I'm thinking. So one of the people who came back for All Stars was Alicia from season 2 of Survivor.
Yeah.
Imagine her response if Ted's like, I gotta say, you got a nice butt. Like, she would like tear him apart.
Did you say Ted or Clay? Because your Ted voice sounds
Oh,
awfully
yes,
suspiciously like.
I meant Clay. Yes, I meant Clay. Yes.
All right, well then that was intentional. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of Gandia, last thing with Gandia,
Yeah.
I gotta reference the name I put in here because I just found this moment so funny. And this is another one that I had remembered, but I didn't attribute it to this season or the people. Actually, I think I remember that Clay wrote it. But there was early on when he votes out Gandia, uh, the name he writes on there, it's like a whole sentence. He writes, "Bye bye Denver Diva." Like
Mhm.
that's not a vote. And then on the flip side, you see like when Ted votes at the very last, when he's on the jury and he votes for Brian, he just writes B. Like you can't get different one letter versus a whole bye bye Denver Diva phrase to the point that Jeff has to be like, I don't know who this is.
Mhm. It's like, especially when they have in the future, if they have like survivors with the same name, you have to differentiate. You should be able to make it very clear. This is the only time that I remember that there's ever a vote that Jeff had to like, and you can tell he was annoyed. Like, oh, normally all these stupid nicknames. You should write clearly with who you're voting for.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everyone still does the nicknames, but at least they're more clear from that point on.
But a lot of times the nicknames are like Boston Rob. It
Yep.
has his name in it. It's a nickname, but you know who it is.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. Well, speaking of votes, let's talk about this final 5 because we're going to get into a little bit more of the tribe dynamics of Sukhjai and Chuigan in a little bit, but the Chuigan. Wait, which one was the one that made it? Was it Chuigan?
Chuigan.
Sukhjai was all voted.
Yeah, Chuigan was Ted and Brian and Clay.
Yeah. So Chuigan, they like do this huge sweep towards the end as they're getting close to the merge. Then they really pull ahead and they do what all these other tribes should have done all along, is like systematically knock them out. I mean, this is exactly what the foursome from the previous season with Marquesas, what they were trying to do before they had that immunity challenge where they very clearly laid out their pecking order.
Yeah.
And so they successfully did it. And then it was this 5. And I really like that Jeff like grilled them on this in the reunion of like, it was clear at a certain point that Clay and Brian were really close. And Ted even calls it out when they go on their immunity challenge together or the reward challenge together.
Mm-hmm.
And yet at no point did the other three be like, hey, we have more, we are able to get Clay. All three of them wanted Clay out. Jan, Helen, and Ted, and they still couldn't come together to do it.
Yeah. And that definitely would have opened up for any of those three to win. You could tell that Helen was very much about who deserves to win based on what they contribute at camp.
Yeah.
That's how, and that's why she would never turn on Brian, because she thought that he worked enough and deserved it. And I think that's, seeing her comments is why she said she would change her mind. But it's just, it's like, you got to put that away and figure out, you're all playing a game. What's the best thing to get you guys to the end? There's a really strong twosome. That's a red flag in this game.
Yeah. Honestly, I think we go back to something else where, because it's like Helen had a connection eventually with Ted, and she had a connection with Jan. Jan and Ted didn't really have too much of a connection, so Helen was kind of setting herself up to be in the final two if she could have joined with Ted and Jan and actually voted for Clay and really pulled that around. I think Jan's best play, because she was always a little bit of an island to herself, but also like she was a team player, but she never had a very strong one-on-one relationship with anyone else. I think when you get to the final six, like somehow pull Jake into it, have the U4 get off Clay, and then maybe Jan and Jake pull Brian and get Ted and Helen off, and then those two old farts can be the ones who picked the tribes in the first place. They can be the ones who get to the end. So I think that was maybe Jan's best shot.
I looked this up. How old? Okay, don't look it up. How old do you think Jan was?
She seemed in the 70s, but she was probably like early 60s.
She was 53.
No way. She
was 53 and Jake was 60. I was like, really? She was not even 60?
53. We're like 15 years. We're 17 years away from that.
Hey, no one needs to do their math.
I just did. Suck on that.
We haven't even hit 40 yet. Now you're having us push 50?
Yes. Brian, of these five, do you think that Brian deserved the win?
I don't know. It's hard to say who deserved win. I think he did, because he was smart in how he played the game. If you look back at it, he didn't get a single elimination vote the entire game. He played half of what they call a perfect game, which is getting no elimination votes, and then you get 100% of the jury votes. I believe it's only happened twice in Survivor history. So he was halfway there. He knew he knew enough to get rid of Helen when he did, even though that pissed her off. He knew to take Clay instead of Jan, because I think Jan could have easily gotten more votes because she was more likable.
Yeah.
So I think Brian kind of played the game that Lex was trying to in Survivor Africa.
Yeah, I think that's a really good comparison. In the way that they took out Ted then Helen, those are the ones that are the strongest comparison. Like you lead up to that final five, those votes. What happened with Ted is he wins an immunity challenge. He wins a reward challenge, both those in a row, as soon as the immunity challenge is to get Jake out, and the reward is their first challenge when it's just the five of them. So Ted is on a streak, and then he loses that immunity challenge, and it's like, no, we've got to get this guy so he's not going to rival us. And then you look at even that final three challenge, I really think Helen had the stamina and the inner strength and the mental strength to beat Brian in that challenge.
Yeah. I think so too. I think it was very strategic to take out Helen, even though it didn't give him her vote.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, the whole thing comes down to those tribe dynamics at the beginning. Like, they were strong because they never let themselves have a crack in the armor. And there was a little bit of the you know, they were too loyal in some regards, because that's how Ted, Jan, and Helen all found their way out before the final two, and why Brian played that little tune to get them to fall in line. But they did have a solidarity, and that's where their tribe kicked Sukjai's butt. Because like if you look at those meetings at like right away when they're trying to figure out, well, do we do shelter or do we do food, and people are trying to take charge, but at the same time you have a character like Rob who is just really a monkey wrench in everything. It really screws you up.
Well, I mean, I was just thinking, you have 8 people. Why can't you have some people do both?
Yeah. I think like I love Rob as a character, but I definitely would have been annoyed being on the beach with him. But I think Rob really throws off that whole dynamic, and that if he wasn't so prone to outbursts and emotional, I think they really could have handled the disjointed beliefs of how do we handle things on this beach, and how do we go about things, and work, because like they were a strong tribe, absolutely.
Yeah, and if they could get their personal connection as good as their physical strength, then they easily could have ran with it.
Yeah, it would be interesting, some what ifs in this, of like seeing, well, what if Rob was on the other tribe? How would they have done? What if like if Jake would have been able to get like a Big Ted or something, or Brian, who at least, like, even though he's the used car salesman of the show, he did do his fair share, and he did work, and he did assimilate well in the camps. So I think you would have had a stronger unit if you would have traded out Rob for one of those guys. And I hate to put it all on him, because it seems like they all didn't like Jed, and that's why they threw it. Like we hear in the reunion, they threw a challenge to get rid of Jed.
Yeah. Which, I mean, wasn't he one of those like, I don't want to play the game?
He might have kind of phrased it that way, but like he was playing the game, but he wasn't like, I think he meant it in the same way Ken did. That like Ken played the game, but at the same time he felt like he was, I don't want to lie, I want to have this integrity, and I want to play it with honor. And I think Jed probably had that same mindset. I think that's what he was meaning if he ever said, I don't want to play the game.
True. And there's also a reason that, much like Jeff in the finale, we haven't really been talking about Ken or Penny or Aaron, because they're likable, but they're not that interesting.
Yeah. I mean, like, Aaron was eye candy. Penny was like, I'm just going to try. Her strategy towards the end of like, well, let me just go ahead and show them that I'm not on Jake's side. Like, that's not they're not going to be like, okay, we won't vote you out. Like, all that would do would buy her 3 days, at most.
The only person who really potentially could have swung over was Sheehan at the fake merge, because she was giving them numbers.
Yeah.
Which we should get up talking about that. Do you remember? Did you remember the fake merge when you were watching it, or no?
I didn't. I didn't remember that they had the fake merge.
When I watched it, I remembered it, and I remembered being fooled by it the first time. Because remember, Jeff's words were very specific, like 2 tribes living together on one beach. When he said that, it kind of like triggered like a memory from like forever ago. Because I knew that screwed over Sheehan.
Yeah, I didn't remember that, but when he said it, I was just I predicted it. So maybe it was in the back of my subconscious, because if I've seen this before, can I really say I predicted it? But when he was like, I never said merge, I'm like, yep, I knew you didn't. I knew you said. But I mean, it's kind of like now, having watched so much TV or movies, that like when you see a character who doesn't have any interactions with any other character, like the janitor in the first season of Scrubs, you're just like, I bet they are in this character's mind. Like you kind of see some of the ways around the twists. And so I think that's having older and wiser, and having seen this before 30 years ago or 20 years ago, that I think that's how he saw it coming. These 2 tribes, the big swing I felt like was, I know there's a couple different times that like they still won after this, but it felt like they had like this winning streak, and then they had the infamous challenge, the attack zone challenge.
Yeah.
And that is like one of those challenges I remember, and I've remembered all these years, even to this day.
Yeah, and the Sukjai were just so excited to attack, especially Rob. And one by one, they lost the challenge, not because they were worse at it, but because every one of them just attacked earlier. You think when the first person attacks outside the zone, you watch your feet, you make sure you're in the zone. Nope, they all one by one attacked outside the zone.
And then not only would that person who attacked get eliminated, but then they would also lose one of their items that they had, and it would go to the other side. So it was like huge penalization every time. They had a huge lead, and then they just kept slowly screwing up that lead until there was no choice but for Chewy to win.
Yeah, and also, legal or not, it's really intense for Rob to just grab Clay by the throat and just like throw him in the water.
I shouldn't laugh. I can't help but laugh every single time I see it, just because Clay is so stout and short compared to Rob, and Rob's like, yeah, I'm immediately going to go for the throat.
And then later Rob's like, oh, he was so dumb, I want to spit in his face. He's just playing the game that you guys are all playing.
He was going, oh! Well, you were choking him. That's the sound of a Clay being choked, sir.
Yeah. Oh, why don't you like die quietly when I'm strangling you, or then I'll spit at your face.
Well, let's look at a couple other challenges, because there's one that I felt like was a Jip reward challenge based on what we saw for another one. Okay, so Brian, he wins this challenge where it's a reward, and the reward is you get a video from your home. And I think he got like a beer or something like that, which is, it's like really funny to go back to like some reward challenges from, I think it was season 1, where it's like, season 1, your reward challenge, as Jeff Probst says, you can have a beer with me. I'll buy you a beer at our makeshift bar and we'll just talk. And I'm like, is that really a reward? I don't want to hang out with Jeff and talk to him while I drink. I don't.
Yeah.
But this one, it's like, he just gets the video, and I think he had the beer, and then like 2 reward challenges later, oh, here's all of your family members here, and you can spend a whole day with them instead of just a 10-minute video that they sent to you.
Yeah. It's weird. You don't often get both the video and the in-person visit. Normally it's one or the other.
Yeah. And then not only that, but obviously the challenge after that, where they have the loved one compete with them.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you just get a video. Never mind. Hey, look, here's your loved ones. Oh, you can't even say goodbye to them. Oh, wait a minute, they didn't leave. They're here again. It's like they did it twice.
Yeah, stop tricking me, Jeff. Tricky McTrickster. I feel like the rewards though this season weren't great outside of like the spa day that Ted won, which let's talk about drunk Ted for a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the one when they're doing like the close-ups and like this person got eliminated. They show his like drunk I'm in ecstasy face as he's getting stretched out and doing
yeah.
He looks like a moron. Like, this is the one you choose, guys. Ted was around for a whole month, and you pick him looking like a fool, getting his back stretched.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe it's just us being different. So I don't know. I mean, I know, Matt, you don't drink. I don't drink much. Especially if I was on Survivor, I would be very, very conscious of the fact that, my mom's going to watch this. I don't need to be sloppy drunk.
Yeah. Helen was such a good sport about it. Like, her line is something about like, Ted won the reward challenge and I'm just a guest. I'm like, good for you, Helen. Yeah, that's a great way to view it.
Well, at least he wasn't being like inappropriate to her. He was just being loud and goofy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, that could still be, I would imagine it was annoying her a little bit, and she's like, great, got to put up with drunk Ted. But again, she's not going to say anything because it wasn't her challenge.
No.
What did you think of the elephant safari reward that Brian won?
I thought it was funny that he was the one that was unsure about the elephant, because you think he's like, yeah, I'm good with everything. He seems like an adventure guy. He's like, is it good? Is this okay? Is this supposed to happen?
And Clay's like, I'm just on the. That's one thing I do appreciate about Clay is I feel like Clay's one of those guys that's like, yeah, I'll just enjoy it. It's coming my way. I'll just embrace it and roll with the punches.
See, I think I'd be fine riding an elephant. Like, I'm not the big adventure guy, really, but like, I'm not gonna like skydive or stuff like that. But I mean, if it's an elephant and I'm in that kind of experience, yeah, I'd go with it.
I think I would feel the same as Brian. I don't think I'd be like scared of riding the elephant, but I think I would be clutching it because I think my center of balance would feel weird. And it would feel like I would get thrown off at any second, even though I know that I wouldn't.
I might feel like that, but I'd still do it and try to have fun, and I'd try to keep it to myself.
Oh yeah, yeah. I wouldn't be like I don't like this. I'd be like I feel weird, but it's beautiful.
It's kind of like when you go to a restaurant with somebody that they picked and it's not your favorite. You know, you're not going to be like, this sucks. You're like, oh, this is okay.
There was a reward challenge that I thought was a really good idea because like looking at all these rewards, I'm like, these all kind of suck apart from that TED one. But the reward challenge where they bring in the red berets to help show them all this stuff to make things livable, because I believe it was they said they didn't give like them anything. They didn't give them any rice or any blankets or like any of their comforts that maybe they've given in the past. They're like, you can survive on anything on this island. You've got this. I think maybe they had like a very few things, but they had a little bit, but not too much.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Survivor, like I'm sure they get expert opinions as like what can you legally do to them to make sure that it's technically survivable.
Yeah, exactly. So if for them like not giving them a whole lot, it felt like they also pulled their punches on the reward challenge. Like, hey, we got you a bunch of bananas. Like, really? I mean, that's sure it keeps for a while and it's sustenance, but like, there's better things. Season 2, you're like, hey, here's a bunch of Mountain Dew and Doritos. You want those? They sponsored us. And this one's like, Chiquita.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they were really into those bananas. There's like a whole episode where like, did you take a banana without checking with the group? And it's just like, it's just a banana, dude.
Speaking of eating stuff, though, the food portion was the absolute worst. If it was me, I couldn't do it. Like, whether I was the family to like get past the boiled tarantula, definitely not the boiled scorpion, or in the challenge where they revisit it. I don't think I could even get past the water roach. That thing is massive. I could maybe do like the spoonful of like, what was it, crickets or something like that?
I think so, yeah.
Gosh, I have a weak stomach. I couldn't do that.
And especially they tricked them, like the tree mouse said something about a feast. They're like, yeah, we're going to eat. Like, that's kind of mean.
Were there any other challenges that you're like, oh, that was a cool one? Or like Rob almost single-handedly winning that one, the reward challenge for the bananas with the baskets and playing that game?
Oh, yeah. That one was good. Otherwise, the ones that we already talked about are the memorable ones, the attack challenge and the Gandia messing up on the puzzle part of it.
Yeah. Well, let's look at a couple historic firsts for the season. So here's a couple things that are small, and we can just kind of hit on this. So Brian is the first person to win the final immunity challenge and then go on to win Survivor. Up until this point, all the winners, they didn't win Survivor. The person they brought with them did.
That's true. I'm thinking about that. Yeah, that is true.
This is also the first season where it is a all-male final two. Most of the time it was male and female, and then the previous season, I believe it was two females.
Vesepia and Malia. Otherwise, it was male-female. And it was the first time that it was a merge at 8 and the fake merge.
Yes, exactly, and that we'll talk about in just a second. So we already hit on that. I was going to give one more small thing is that Brian was also the first person to win the most individual immunity challenges and then also be the sole survivor.
That's right, because he didn't win as many as Colby, but Colby was a runner-up.
Yeah. Vesepia actually tied for the most because she had 2, and so she tied, but he was this flat out, he won the most individual immunities and then also won. Yeah. But yeah, the merging at 8 and not merging when they first got together in the 10, that was the first time they did that. Do they do that sort of late merge again at any point?
I don't remember. I mean, they do merges at different times, but I don't remember. I don't know if they ever do like a fake, like, hey, you're not merging. I think after this, hardcore fans who go on the show are going to be listening to Jeff's words really closely.
Yeah. And in Survivor Africa, they kind of teased it, Jeff did, because at one point, shortly after the first tribe swap, he's like, "You've made a lot of assumptions in this game. You've even assumed that there's a merge." And then he just left that with them. They're like, "What?" And like nothing really came of that. They still merged around the same time. But he, like, in the episode before the merge, he kind of alluded to the fact that, like, you might not even merge at all. Who knows? I don't.
Yeah. Oh, and another thing is that this is the first time, and I know this has come back in a few random times, when Jeff's like, "Hey, you want to trade? You want to swap tribes?" Like he like opens it up like for anybody to swap to the other tribe if they wanted to.
That's right. And Xian almost did.
Yeah.
She should have. I really wondered what, like, I know that in hindsight it's 2020, and probably being the new one going like, yeah, I switched over, and they'd be like, well, you're not part of our tribe. We're going to vote you out first chance we get.
Well, I mean, even what she was trying to do when she thought they merged, what did she think? They would probably use her as numbers to get rid of the rest of Sukjai, but then did she really think that she was going to jump into like, oh, then they're going to bring me to the final two?
Yeah. I mean, at that point, like, you bought yourself pretty much, if she did that, she buys herself 12 days. In that 12 days, you can form a relationship and you can see the cracks in the other 5 and you can see where maybe you can maneuver in.
Even then, she's not going to get any of the Sukjai votes in the tribal council, so she has to count on getting like all of like Ted, Helen, Clay, Brian. Like she has to count on getting all of their votes to even get a chance on winning. Because there's no way Ken or Penny or Aaron is going to vote for her. I don't know, Jake maybe, but
yeah.
Speaking
of Jake, here's another first for this season. This was the first time we had a pick your team that they weren't automatically assigned.
Yeah.
So
interesting choices for the teams too.
Yeah, it is funny though. It's like everyone was probably having the same thought about Jan. Even her own tribe, they're like, I looked around, I did not like all these old people on this tribe, and they have all the strong stallions, and it's like whatever. But that was the stronger tribe, and so good on Jan. She made it to the final 3. Jake was a final member of his tribe, so they were the respected elders of the tribe, and they made a long way on both of those.
Yeah, I didn't remember that Jake made it far. Like I said, I remembered like I thought I remembered the final 5. For some reason, I thought I remembered Gandia being in like the final 6 or 7. But I did not remember that like the middle of how they went out. I thought that Jake went out earlier than he did.
Yeah, I knew Gandia was before the merger. Once like we met her, I'm like, and they had their incident. I'm like, oh yeah, she doesn't make it long after this incident. They vote her off instead of the other. Everyone else, I didn't remember Helen being that strong of a player, or Jan, or I think I remember Ted. I think I in my mind when I was guessing halfway through the show, I'm like, okay, I think the final 3 are Ted, Clay, and Brian. But
I didn't remember who the third one was. I thought maybe it was Helen. So like when it got to the end, I knew it was Clay was the runner-up and Brian was the winner, but I didn't exactly remember who was the third place person. So even watching it, I was a little bit unspoiled.
Look at you, Mr. Unspoiled.
Mm-hmm. This is also, I mean, I've rewatched a number of seasons over the years because I'm a huge Survivor nerd, but like I've never really gone back to Thailand because I always remembered that this was kind of a dud season for me.
Yeah. And it was. I'm looking forward to Survivor Amazon. Before we talk about Survivor Amazon, what we remember, anything from the reunion that you want to talk about?
Well, they're still on the train of like making sure they show any women who get naked with Stephanie, and having a whole thing about Jeff could go so far as say, why didn't this girl show up on the island?
He did.
Like, yeah.
I don't want to side with we want to see naked women portion of this, but I will say I was looking at what he was like all the people he talked to, and that was the only time they talked about Stephanie in the reunion. And so I think that was part of like we don't have much to say about her because whatever. And so I like we've got to have something to talk about Stephanie. Like they barely got John in. There's like, oh, last minute before we go, hey John, you didn't make it that far. Yeah. Sucks, right?
That's another thing about early Survivor. They make sure to talk to everybody. There are seasons later on in the reunion where there are people especially in the top row of the early people, they don't even mention them at all. There are some people who don't get that mention later on. but early on they make sure they talk to everybody at least a little bit.
Yeah, everyone got at least one mention, and part of it was strategic because like some of the earlier mentions for like Aaron or Penny was asking them about their votes with Brian. It's like, okay, you guys have something to contribute, but we don't have a lot to talk about with you, so let's make sure we hit on this real quick. Aaron and Penny, why, etc.
Yeah, no, I agree, and also I don't know if this is a reunion, but I think that Helen is this season's Sue Hawk, where she thought that she deserved to be at the end, and she was bitter about it.
Yeah, to be fair, I think she did. I think she did deserve it. She was a really good player. I remembered, or I figured I didn't like her very much as a teenager, but she might have been one of my favorite characters this go around. And I'm not even entirely sure what that is. I didn't think I'd like her, especially after the Jan got us lost. If I had a pistol, I'd shoot her first.
Oh yeah, that was intense.
They loved that line. I don't know. I think I just really appreciated her straightforward demeanor. Like Ken had a straightforward demeanor too, but Helen had the demeanor with still the intention to be strategic in the game as well. She just got out strategized and she trusted the wrong person.
Yeah. And speaking of the reunion, another first, from here on out, there's no more Brian Gumbel or Rosie O'Donnell. It's Jeff Probst doing the finale from here on out.
Yeah. Yeah. Survivor Marquesas with Rosie O'Donnell was a strange experiment. It was like, this was more return to the form. It was a little different than obviously how Brian Gumbel does it. But it was still more of the let's ask you questions about this. Where Rosie O'Donnell's was more like the Jimmy Fallon late night show, like let's play a game, let's be hilarious.
I was gonna compare her to Maury Povich.
You are not the father. No one, that was never in question. You could tell there's some awkwardness though with Jeff too, because like Jeff and how they were treating him, because like with Brian. It was a little different when he asked him questions like, oh, here's this journalist asking us questions. We're having fun. We're on the union. Then Jeff asks you these questions and you're like, Dad, I'm sorry. Let me give you my response. And like they were a little more sheepish or like defensive about things and having to explain to him because they were used to all these questions. They were a little guarded. I think he even had a comment at one point where it's like, guys, this isn't like tribal council. You got to give me a straight answer. It's all done now. You can be honest.
Yeah. You could tell when Jeff was getting a little bit annoyed.
Yeah. You can always tell. There's signs.
Yes.
All right. Well, Survivor Season 6 in the Amazon. Again, I don't want to be on the side of like, let's talk about naked women. But one of the things I remember.
It's a big part of the season.
Exactly. Like so all these survivors on one of the immunity challenges, it's one of those stand on a pole and the last one standing gets immunity challenge. Oh, you guys all have willpower. Well, what if I bring out all these things like a cheeseburger and stuff? And so then there's these two girls that are just like, you're like, we aren't going to go down no matter what. And there's like, oh, well, there's peanut butter. Or something like, if you take off your clothes, we'll get you peanut butter. And so then they took off their clothes and they brought out peanut butter and chocolate, I think. And then they both jumped in and
with that, another little detail. So there's a guy, Butch, who he's like an older, I think he's like a school principal or something. And he's looking down. I remember him when that's happening. He's like, I'm not looking. And someone else is like, I'm looking.
I didn't remember Butch. I had to look it up. I wouldn't have remembered him seeing his.
Yeah. So I'm not going to spoil. I remember clearly. I know the order of the final five. I remember who wins, and I remember who's the final five. So I'm not going to spoil that for you guys. But I do remember this is the one where they start out with men versus women for tribes.
I was going to say, I thought that was this one.
Yes. And this one, you might know who it is, has one of my favorite survivors of all time.
Is it Rob?
It is. I like Rob a lot. We'll talk about him next season. And season 5 we had a Brian. In season 6 there's a Matthew.
Oh, look at that. Full circle.
Mm-hmm.
I got that. Those were like the biggies I remember. I remember the gender tribes. I remember the naked challenge, and I remembered that Rob, I think Rob was one of those players that was not as smart as he thought he was.
Yes
Right?
and no. I mean, obviously that, but he also played a really good game, and he came very close to winning. Obviously, okay, I'm spoiling that Rob doesn't win.
Yeah, but I had a feeling like he was one of those guys. Like everyone knew they couldn't trust him, but at the same time, no one voted him out for a while. I thought I don't remember a whole lot. I just remember like he was if there's a heroes, I think there's a heroes versus villains, and if they brought him back, he would be on the villain side.
Probably, yeah. I mean, Rob does come back in Survivor All Stars.
Okay, look at that, knowing things.
Yep, Rob, and there's one other person from Survivor Amazon who comes back from the All Stars.
I can't remember what all these. I didn't even remember much, and I don't remember the name of the two ladies. I think one is Jenna.
Yep, Jenna and Heidi.
Jenna and Heidi. Yeah, that sounds right. I mean, I'm sure it. You're not gonna lie to me. It's Lucy and Felucia. Not even Felicia. Felucia, like the planet from Star Wars.
There's a planet in Star Wars named Felucia.
Yeah, do you remember in episode 3 when it's Order 66 and they're shooting all these Jedis and they're all dying?
Yeah.
And there's like the blue lady who like is in like this jungle planet and it's like all bright colors.
Yeah.
That's Felucia.
Huh.
You're welcome. I am a nerd.
Well, I'm impressed. That's like Jeff level of detail that you know there.
It is. I don't think Jeff is listening to this, but if he did, he'd be like, "Well done, Matt. Well done."
And that's also, I think that's all that we had to say about Survivor Season 6 without me saying this person is the winner.
Yeah. And thank you for not saying that because I have no idea. So
okay, good.
So then let's talk about trivia. Let's go back to last week because last week was a different episode where we talked about wedding episodes. Hope you guys enjoyed your Valentine's Day. Hope you enjoyed. It might have been a while since an episode is posted because this is probably posting after I get back from my 2.5-week vacation. That is wonderful. I already know it was so much fun. We had such great times. Let me tell you about all of these memories. Deleted. And then it was great. Anyway, trivia from last time, the wedding episode. Go ahead, Brian.
I asked who in the Full House episode showed off a skill that they have in real life, which is that Joey Gladstone flew a plane and Dave Coulier is an actual pilot. So I don't think he was actually flying a plane in real life because it was clearly like a set. But Dave Coulier is a pilot.
He's a pilot.
All right. So for this week, which of these Survivor Thailand contestants was a swim instructor for the U.S. Navy?
Was it me?
Yes. You are a contestant in Survivor Thailand when you were 13.
I was. You don't know this, but I was.
Interesting.
Interesting. All right.
Many seasons from now, there will be a contestant who is under 21. And in one of those challenges, they're like, we have burgers and steaks and beer and soft drinks for you. They singled him out and said that.
What a loser! Well, that's all we have time for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Next week, we're going to talk about something that we're not always anxious to jump back into. Back in 2020, almost 5 years ago from the date that this episode will premiere, the whole planet shut down and our nation shut down shortly after St. Patrick's Day, and all because of a little bug called COVID-19. And so that changed the face of TV and modern media, and a lot of TV shows also looked at how they handled COVID epidemic. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Hopefully it'll be more fun than it was during 2020. And hopefully we, don't treat it like morons and jerks and rub people the wrong way. We're not anxious to jump back into that, but at the same time, the impact of it can't be understated. So we wanted to really take a moment and observe on this anniversary how it impacted our TV watching. So we're going to talk about that, and should be good.
Yep.
Until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.